Welcome back to the Just As I Am podcast. I'm your host as always, Nicole, and I love a good story time. So today we're going to be talking about Jesus and his parables. Have you ever asked a question and then someone answered you without answering the question at all? Because honestly, I feel like this happens a lot. And what I'm getting to is Jesus was known for a whole lot of things, obviously. But he is especially known for telling parables. Jesus was a great teacher, and this was a way that he found very efficient in getting his point across. Jesus told more than 40 parables in the New Testament. And today we're going to be talking about 7 of those. Some randomly selected, some not, but you feel free to go back and find all of them. And tell me what you think. So we're going to start off with number 7, and we are going to talk about the parable of the new cloth and the wineskin. Now, when searching for things in the Bible, sometimes it's easy to find what you are accustomed to, I guess, what you've heard, what you know for sure. And then sometimes you look up to see where it's at, and then you go there, and it is what you're talking about, but it's not exactly what you had in your mind that you knew that you've heard before. And so I am going to let you in on this parable can be found in 3 books in the New Testament. It can be found in Matthew 9:16 through 17, Mark 2:21 through 22, and Luke 5:36 through 38. So this begins with John the Baptist's disciples. They come to Jesus and they ask him, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but yours do not?" I don't know if I would say rude or take it as a good question. But they come to Jesus, and Jesus tells them, he says, "Can the wedding guests be sad that the groom is with them?" Then he says, "The time will come that the groom will be taken away from them, and they will fast." So still not understanding, apparently, he adds, "No one patches a garment with unshrunken cloth because it will just make the patch worse. No one puts new wine into old wineskin because otherwise it will burst and then it's ruined." So it'll tear, it'll burst, it's no good anymore. Jesus was trying to explain that his ways or their ways would not fit into the current religious ways, because we had all of this, but then, Jesus came in to reinforce, I don't want to say what really matters because it all matters, but he came to emphasize, new and improved, better. You tell me what you think would work there. But that is number 7. Number 6, the parable of the lampstand. This one can be found in also 3 books. Matthew 5:14 through 16, Mark 4:21 through 22, and Luke 8:16. Now this one made me laugh because once again, in my regular day-to-day life, this verse has popped up at least twice. One of my students at school, this is his Bible verse for class that I've been working on, helping him learn. And then today at church, the pastor brought up part of this verse, part of this parable, and I was like, giddy on the inside. But this parable is a continuation of the Sermon on the Mount, and the prequel to this is the discussion of the Beatitudes, and it leads into many other things, but first it leads into this. And it says, you are the salt of the earth. So Jesus talks about how if salt loses its saltiness, it's pointless. You use salt for its flavor when you put it in food or to melt the ice on your porch during winter, or, a few other things. And if it loses the essence of what it is, there's no use for it. It's pointless. So then he goes to say, you are the light of the world. You can't see a light if it's hidden. If you have a lamp, you put it on a lampstand for the whole house to see it. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and glorify God. So basically, if you're doing positive things, if you are living out your faith and just living like Jesus, don't do it just behind closed doors, do it for all to see, because they're going to see that, and then they're going to put the pieces together and understand, hey, this is God. He has something to do with this. So, number 5, the parable of the wise and foolish builders. The song from Sunday school back in the day pops up in my head and makes me happy. This one can only be found in 2 books. It can be found in Matthew 7:24 through 27, or Luke 6:47 through 49. So this is still during the whole Sermon on the Mount, right? Jesus begins with, if anyone hears these words of mine and acts on them, will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. So basically, whatever happens to the house, earthquake, tornado, hurricane, dust storm, whatever they had in this land. Probably none of those things, but you get my point. The house will survive. It will still stand because it was built on a firm foundation, right? Anyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act on them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand, whose house will crash at the slightest inconvenience. So, basically, Christ is our firm foundation, which has been on my playlist a lot. Isn't that Cody Carnes? I think it is. I think it's him who sings that song, and it's been on repeat. But, if you hear that song, then it really kind of goes into detail about Christ being our foundation, being that solid rock so that we don't waver, He keeps us firm, and he keeps us steady, and he keeps us going. So, number 4, the parable of the sower. This can be found in Matthew chapter 13, 3 through 24, Mark chapter 4, 3 through 20, and Luke chapter 8, 5 through 15. This one is kind of for all of you gardeners out there. Just exercising your knowledge on having your green thumb and knowing how things grow and how some things survive here and some things survive there and some things don't survive here, but they do survive there. Just all, So think of the sower. He has out to sow and has dropped seeds on the path. So he's gone out, he's reaped, sowed his harvest, whatever. And he dropped seeds on the path that he is walking. The birds devoured the seeds that were dropped on the path. Okay? Then he dropped seeds in the rocks. Those seeds withered because their ground was not good enough for them. And then he drops seeds into the thorns. Well, when they started to grow, the thorns choked them and they could not last. They could not survive. The seed that fell on the good ground was incredibly fruitful. It's kind of like the building on a good foundation, right? If you have that good soil, that good earth that the plants can grow, survive, and thrive in, they're going to grow, survive, and thrive, right? Our next one is number 3, the parable of the mustard seed. Now, I know if you've heard any of these, you've probably heard the builder, the wise man, and the foolish man, and you've probably heard this one. So, you can find this in Matthew chapter 13, 31 through 32, Mark chapter 4, 30 through 32, or Luke chapter 13, 19, 18, and 19. It begins like this. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. Although the tiniest of seeds, it can grow bigger than many other plants. If you've looked at a mustard seed, it is incredibly small. It is one of the smallest seeds out there. But Jesus uses this as a comparison to the kingdom of God, right? So usually you hear this related to faith, right? Faith the size of a mustard seed can even move the biggest of mountains or whatever. But Jesus is using this to say that even if you only have one Christian, if you only have one believer, if you only have one, person of faith here, that can grow huge, okay? I mean, it's spread all over the world now, right? Prime example. So number 2, you've definitely heard of this one as well. This one is the Good Samaritan. So you can find this in Luke chapter 10, 30 through 37. And this happens after Jesus speaks in Luke 10:27, talking about, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, body, mind, everything, right? Well, at the end of that it says, love your neighbor or something like that. And this person comes up to Jesus and he's asking and he's like, well, who's my neighbor? And obviously Jesus responds by telling him a story. So a man was walking down the road to Jericho, right? And all of a sudden he has these robbers come upon him. They beat him, they take all of his stuff, and they leave him for dead. Right? So he's there for a pretty good minute, and then a priest starts coming down the road. So you're like, oh, good, the priest is going to help him. No, the priest crosses to the other side of the road and passes him and continues going. Sometime later, a Levite is coming down the road, and just as the priest goes to the other side and passes him and continues without even saying a word. After all of this, you're like, is this man ever going to get some help? Well, here we go. Then a Samaritan is walking down the road. He sees this man who has been robbed, beaten, left for dead. And he takes him and he patches all of his wounds, he cleans him up, patches him, takes care of the man, sets him up for the night, and he's like, hey, and if you need help taking care of however long it takes you to recoup, let me know. I'll come back and I'll help you. is so beautiful. So then Jesus asks the man who asked him about who his neighbor is, and he says, which one proved to be the neighbor? So the man answers and he goes, the one who showed mercy. So Jesus responds and tells him to go and do the same. And here we are at number 1, the parable of the prodigal son. Man, I feel like this guy gets talked about a lot. And many songs about being a prodigal, or not being a prodigal. Being the prodigal son, I guess. But this one gives me sweet memories because last year I read it to some of my little kiddos at work. And, you talk about the story in step by step. And was that kind, or was that a good choice? No. But it's really so sweet. You can find the parable of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15, 11 through 31. And it begins with this younger son asking his dad for his inheritance. And he takes his inheritance from his father, and then he goes off. He goes pretty far off. And blows his inheritance, and then things start, not looking so good. There's famine, whatever. Well, he finally comes to the conclusion, man, how is it that I had all of this and my dad's servants back home have whatever they ate, 3 square meals a day, a roof over their head, all of this. And he's like, what? That makes no kind of sense. So he's like, you know what? I'm just going to go home. I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell my dad, you know what? I sinned. I wasn't a good son. I'm sorry. So he heads home, and before he even reaches, I guess the dad's property or something, the dad sees him, runs hard, okay? Goes to the son, hugs him super tight, gives him some kisses. And he's like, oh, my son, thrilled to see his son. And the son is like, but Dad, I've sinned, I'm sorry. But the dad is like, you know what? No big deal. It's great. So he goes and he tells his servants, he's like, hey, go slaughter the fattened calf, and we are fixing to eat that for dinner tonight, okay? My son is home. We're fixing to celebrate. We're fixing to party. Well, the other son, the older son, sees this, and he's like, well, this ain't right. This doesn't make sense. So he goes to the dad, and he's like, hey, I have stayed here. I have worked hard. He went off and did all of these things, and I didn't even get a goat for it. And the dad tells him, he says, look, he was once dead, but now he's alive. He was once lost, but now he's found. Beautiful. One of the songs definitely is Sidewalk Prophets, right? Sidewalk Prophets, when they sing The Prodigal. Oh, man. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. But it definitely explains this parable, saying, no matter what you've done, no matter what you're going to do, how things are, you can come home. God is going to accept you with open arms. Everything's going to be good. So all can be forgiven, if you ask for forgiveness and you repent, and then, you live your life the way you should. But I hope y'all enjoyed this. It took me a minute to gather all of this, but I think it came together well. And I hope that I covered some of the parables that you indeed liked. And maybe I didn't cover one, but you want to share, so just let me know. Y'all have a great week, and I will see you for the next one.